Welcome back to part 2 of our video series on Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of the United States. In the previous video, we examined the heinous crimes Bundy committed before his first arrest. In this installment, we will be discussing Bundy's capture, subsequent escapes, and the events leading up to his ultimate capture and execution. Join us as we unravel the mystery behind one of the most infamous and cunning serial killers in history. It all started in 1975 when a Utah Highway Patrol officer spotted Bundy cruising around a residential area in his trusty Volkswagen Beetle. The officer found some suspicious items in Bundy's car, including a ski mask, handcuffs, and a crowbar. At first, they were assumed to be burglary tools, but Detective Jerry Thompson had a feeling there was more to it. Thompson remembered a previous kidnapping case that had a suspect and car description that matched Bundy's, and so he started digging deeper. He linked Bundy to the crimes, and a search of Bundy's apartment revealed even more evidence, such as a guide to Colorado ski resorts and a brochure advertising a play at the school where one of his victims had disappeared. Despite all this incriminating evidence, the police didn't have enough to detain him, and he was released on his own recognizance. But it later emerged that searchers had missed a hidden collection of Polaroid photos of his victims that Bundy had destroyed. The Salt Lake City police placed Bundy under 24-hour surveillance, and while they were watching him, 3 detectives went to Seattle to interview Bundy's former girlfriend, Klopfer. She shared some disturbing information about strange objects found in their shared home and Bundy's apartment. These objects included crutches, stolen plaster of Paris, a meat cleaver, surgical gloves, a knife, and women's clothing. Klopfer also shared that Bundy was in debt, had stolen items, and became upset when she considered cutting her hair. She even woke up to find him examining her body with a flashlight under the bedcovers. The detectives confirmed that Bundy was not with Klopfer during any of the Pacific Northwest disappearances or the day of Ott and Naslin's abduction. Later on, Klopfer was interviewed by Seattle detective Kathy McChesney, and she learned about Bundy's brief engagement to Diane Edwards in 1973. This information was a crucial part of the investigation into Bundy's crimes, and it helped detectives to piece together a timeline of his actions. In September 1975, Bundy sold his Volkswagen Beetle to a teenager in Midvale. Utah police impounded the car and the FBI searched it. They found hairs that matched samples from the body of Carol Duranch, Deborah Kent, and Melissa Smith, 3 of his victims. An FBI lab specialist concluded that it would be a highly rare coincidence for hairs from 3 different victims to be found in one car. In October 1975, Bundy was put into a police lineup, and Carol Duranch immediately identified him as Officer Roseland. Witnesses from Bountiful also recognized him as the stranger at the Viewmont High School auditorium. Although there was not enough evidence to connect him to the disappearance of Deborah Kent, there was sufficient evidence to charge him with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in the Duranch case. Bundy was released on $15,000 bail, which was paid by his parents, and he spent most of the time before trial living in Seattle at his ex-girlfriend Klopfer's house. Although the Seattle police did not have enough evidence to charge him with the Pacific Northwest murders, they kept him under close surveillance. According to Klopfer, whenever they left the house, so many unmarked police cars started up that it sounded like the beginning of the Indy 500. In 1976, Ted Bundy stood trial for kidnapping and assault in the Duranch case, and was found guilty by Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. after a 4-day bench trial. He was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. In October, he was caught trying to escape with an escape kit, and spent time in solitary confinement. In January 1977, Colorado authorities charged him with the murder of Campbell and he was transferred to Aspen after waiving extradition proceedings. In June 1977, Ted Bundy was brought to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado for a preliminary hearing, where he was serving as his own attorney and was not restrained with handcuffs or leg shackles. During a recess, Bundy asked to go to the law library to research his case and, while out of sight of the guards, he jumped out of a second-story window, injuring his right ankle. Bundy then escaped by hiking and stealing his way through the mountains, evading search parties for 6 days until he was finally pulled over by police. Evidence found in the car he was driving showed that his escape was premeditated and planned, as he had possession of maps of the area used by prosecutors to demonstrate the location of one of his victims. In jail in Glenwood Springs, Bundy ignored advice to stay put and instead planned a new escape. He acquired a detailed floor plan of the jail and a hacksaw blade from other inmates, as well as $500 in cash smuggled in by visitors. While other prisoners were showering, he sawed a hole between the steel reinforcing bars in his cell ceiling, allowing him to explore the crawlspace above. He lost 35 pounds and was able to wriggle through the hole and make a series of practice runs in the weeks that followed. Multiple reports from an informant of movement within the ceiling during the night were not investigated. In late 1977, Bundy's trial was set to be held in Aspen, Colorado, but he filed for a change of venue to Denver. The judge granted the request but moved the trial to Colorado Springs, known for being hostile to murder suspects. On December 30, Bundy escaped by piling books and files in his bed, climbing into the crawlspace, breaking through the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, changing into street clothes, and walking out the front door to freedom while most of the jail staff were on Christmas break. Ted Bundy successfully escaped from the Glenwood Springs jail on December 30, 1977. He stole a car and drove to Vail, where he caught a bus to Denver and then a flight to Chicago. The jail staff did not discover his escape until 17 hours later, by which time he was already in Chicago. Ted Bundy arrived in Ann Arbor, Michigan after taking a train from Chicago. From there, he stole a car and drove to Atlanta, then boarded a bus and arrived in Tallahassee, Florida on January 8. Bundy spent one night at a hotel before renting a room under the name Chris Hagen at a boarding house near the Florida State University campus. Bundy initially attempted to find legitimate employment and stay away from crime but failed to secure a job after being asked for identification. He eventually returned to his old ways of shoplifting and stealing from women's wallets at local grocery stores. On January 15, 1978, just a week after his arrival in Tallahassee, Bundy gained entry to the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University through a rear door with a faulty lock. In the early hours of the morning, he carried out a vicious attack on Margaret Bowman, 21, killing her by hitting her with a heavy piece of oak firewood and strangling her with a nylon stocking. He then entered the room of 20-year-old Lisa Levy and subjected her to a similar attack, beating and strangling her. Two other women, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, were also targeted but managed to survive due to the light from nearby car headlights. Nita Neary, a sorority sister, witnessed Bundy as he fled the scene and alerted authorities. Within the next hour, Bundy made his way to a duplex near Florida State University. There, he found student Cheryl Thomas asleep in her bed and launched a brutal attack, causing permanent deafness and ending her dance career. Thomas's neighbors heard the commotion and quickly called the police, who discovered her badly beaten and lying in bed. The police also found a makeshift mask at the scene, which had hairs similar to Bundy's. The quick succession of these attacks left law enforcement officials shocked and bewildered, struggling to understand the motives behind such a rapid and ruthless spree. In February of 1978, Bundy traveled to Jacksonville, Florida in a stolen vehicle, where he attempted to abduct 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter in a parking lot but was thwarted when her older brother intervened. Later that day, Bundy backtracked to Lake City, where he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach. Her remains were found 7 weeks later. On February 12, Bundy fled Tallahassee due to an overdue rent and fear of police closing in on him. He stole a car and drove west, but was stopped by a police officer in Pensacola 3 days later. When the officer attempted to arrest him, Bundy kicked him and fled but was eventually tackled and arrested by the officer. In the stolen car, the police found IDs belonging to female FSU students, stolen credit cards, a stolen TV, and a disguise used in Jacksonville. As the officer took him to jail, Bundy wished that he had been killed. The officer was unaware that he had just arrested one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. In a pre-trial plea bargain, Bundy was offered a 75-year prison sentence if he pled guilty to killing 3 victims. The prosecutors were willing to make the deal because they were not confident in their ability to win the case at trial. Bundy saw the plea deal as a way to avoid the death penalty and to give himself time to find ways to weaken the case against him. However, at the last minute, Bundy refused the plea deal because he couldn't bring himself to admit guilt publicly. During the trial, key evidence was presented that implicated Bundy in the murders, including testimony from Chi Omega sorority members Connie Hastings and Nita Neary. Physical evidence, such as bite marks on one of the victim's buttocks, was also presented, which was matched to Bundy's teeth. Bundy was found guilty on July 24, 1979, of the murders of Bowman and Levy, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of burglary. The trial judge imposed the death penalty for the murder convictions. The jury only deliberated for less than 7 hours. Ted Bundy was found guilty for the abduction and murder of Kimberly Leach in a second trial held 6 months after the first one. Material evidence, such as clothing fibers with a unique manufacturing error found in the van and on Leach's body, also matched fibers from the jacket Bundy wore when he was arrested. During the penalty phase of the trial for the murder of Kimberly Leach, Bundy used a Florida law that allowed a marriage declaration in court to constitute a legal marriage. Bundy proposed to Carol Ann Boone, who had moved to Florida to be closer to him and was testifying as a character witness. Boone accepted, and Bundy declared to the court that they were married. On February 10, 1980, Bundy was sentenced to death for the 3rd time, this time for the murder of Kimberly Leach. When the sentence was announced, Bundy reportedly stood up and shouted, "Tell the jury they were wrong." This 3rd death sentence was the one that would ultimately be carried out almost 9 years later. In 1981, Bundy's former girlfriend, Boone, had a daughter named Rose and named Bundy as the father. Despite conjugal visits being prohibited at the Florida State Prison, rumors circulated about inmates bribing guards for private time with their female visitors. Thank you for tuning in to part 3 of our series on Ted Bundy. We hope that this video has provided some insight into Bundy's notorious escapes and captures, shedding light on his cunning and manipulative personality. In the next video, we will be exploring the psychological and pathological aspects of Ted Bundy, as we delve into the unsettling truth about the mind of a serial killer. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on this next installment. Thank you for watching.